Co Yuna died at 17. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way anyone would write about or remember. She just signed some papers she didn't fully understand, trusted the wrong people for too long, and then one day, her body gave out from the stress of it all. The loneliness, the years of being quietly pushed aside, the slow erosion of everything that had once been hers. She died on a cold hospital floor, while her stepsister stood in the hallway outside, already on the phone with a lawyer. The last thing Yuna thought before everything went dark was, "I should have paid more attention," and then she woke up. Same bedroom, same water stain on the ceiling shaped like a rabbit, same scratchy wool blanket. She was 11 years old again, and her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. She lay completely still for a full minute, staring upward, waiting to understand what had happened to her. She understood it by the third day. She was sitting at the breakfast table when her stepmother placed a glass of orange juice in front of her, with a warm smile, and said good morning, in that soft, practiced voice she always used. And from somewhere underneath the smile, not out loud, not in the room, but somewhere behind the woman's eyes, like a whisper in a locked room, Yuna heard the rest of what she was thinking. What a burden this child is to feed. Yuna's spoon hit the table. Nobody looked up. But Yuna sat there with her hands in her lap, and her heart very still, and understood that something had come back with her, from wherever she had been. Something quiet, and strange, and sharp as a needle. She could hear what people were thinking. Not everything, not all the time. Only the thoughts that had weight to them, the ones that meant something, the ones people worked hardest to hide. She spent the next few weeks testing it carefully, the way you test ice before you step on it. She would sit near people, and go very still, and just listen. Not to their words, to the layer underneath. Her father was not a bad man. That was the hardest part about him. He was the kind of person who genuinely wanted to do right by everyone, and consistently failed at it, because he could never bring himself to look at anything difficult for too long. When Yuna showed him a drawing she had made and he smiled and told her it was wonderful, she heard what sat under the smile. She looked so much like her mother and I cannot stand it. He loved her. She could feel that clearly. But love that cannot hold its gaze is not very useful to a child who needs someone to notice things. Her stepmother was easier to read, because she did not bother hiding very much from herself. The affection was performance. The warmth at the dinner table was a costume she put on and took off. Underneath it was something simple and practical. This house, this name, this money, these are mine now and I intend to keep them. There was no rage in her, no particular cruelty, just a very calm and determined selfishness that had learned over the years to wear a soft expression. Dayon was the one Yuna studied most carefully. Her stepsister was 3 years older, and had been in this house longer, and understood its rhythms, the way you understand a game you have been playing your whole life. She was charming in the way that people are charming, when they have learned that charm is a tool. She touched your arm when she spoke to you. She always seemed to be agreeing with you. She cried, at exactly the right moments. Yuna had believed in all of it during her first life, had defended Danon to people who tried to warn her, had genuinely thought of her as family. Now she listened underneath. What she heard was not the thoughts of someone who hated her. That would have been easier, in a way. What she heard was something colder than hatred. A plan, not laid out in sentences but felt in fragments. A long patience, a quiet ambition, a certainty that everything in this house would eventually belong to Dayon if she simply waited, and managed, and kept everyone looking in the wrong direction. Yuna was not an obstacle in this plan so much as a variable, something to be managed, something to be made smaller, gradually, over time. Yuna let herself feel the full weight of that for one night. She sat in her room in the dark, and let herself be angry, and sad, and frightened. Then she put it away, because she had already lived the life where she did nothing with those feelings except carry them, and she knew exactly where that life ended. She started paying attention differently. The first thing she did was stop being predictable. In her first life she had been easy to read, easy to move, easy to make feel guilty. She had apologized when she had done nothing wrong. She had forgiven things that were not offered in good faith. She had stayed small, because staying small felt like the safest option. None of that anymore. At a family dinner a few months after she woke up, Dayon did something she had done dozens of times before. She gave a careful little performance, a few tears, a soft voice, a confession that she was worried about Yuna, that Yuna had been distant lately, that she only wanted to be close to her little sister. Their father looked at Yuna with that familiar tired concern. Their stepmother patted Datson's hand. Yuna heard what Don was thinking underneath all of it. Just say you forgive me. You always do. It makes everything so much simpler. So this time, Yuna looked at her very calmly and said she wasn't sure exactly what Don was apologizing for, and could she be more specific about what happened. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Daeon's eyes did something in that moment. A small flicker, a brief adjustment, and Yuna saw something behind them she had never seen before, because she had never made Daeon uncertain before. The tears did not come. The script had not prepared for this response. Nobody said much for the rest of dinner. But something had shifted, and all 4 people at the table could feel it, even if only one of them understood what it was. Over the following year, Yuna built something she thought of privately as a record. Not written down anywhere, just held carefully inside her, organized and dated, and cross-referenced the way someone keeps evidence who knows they will need it later. She heard her stepmother speaking quietly to a different lawyer about something related to her father's accounts. She heard Dondon tell a girl at school that Yuna was not quite right, a little strange, the kind of person who said things that didn't make sense, planting that seed early, gently, so that if Yuna ever said anything alarming, it would already have a place to land. She heard her father's business associate think one afternoon that the household finances did not look the way they should for a man of his position, and that the wife seemed to control more than was typical. She filed all of it away, and she waited. The opportunity came when she was 14. Her father had a formal dinner with a senior colleague, a careful and thorough man who had known the family for years. Yuna sat at the end of the table and ate quietly and listened. She heard the colleague look at her stepmother and think, she is moving money in small amounts across multiple accounts. I have seen this done before, and I know what it means. She heard her stepmother look at the colleague and think, he is suspicious. I need my husband away from this man. She heard Dazun look at Yuna and think, she is so quiet lately. She makes me nervous when she is this quiet. That one almost made her smile. After dinner, while the adults had tea, Yuna walked to the hallway where the colleague's coat was hanging, and she slipped a small folded note into his inside pocket. 3 sentences. No name. She had thought carefully about every word for several days before writing it. Check the accounts opened in the 2nd year of the marriage. Someone has been careful for a long time. So have I. What followed was not a single dramatic scene. It never is, with things like this. It was phone calls her father came home from looking older. It was her stepmother going very still at certain moments, in a way she had never gone still before. It was papers appearing on the kitchen counter and then disappearing. It was her father spending 3 evenings in a row in his study with the door closed, which he had never done in all the years she had known him. Daeseon noticed the change in the atmosphere before she understood its cause. She came to Yuna's room one afternoon with a different kind of warmth than usual, more careful, more deliberate. She sat on the edge of the bed and talked about how strange the house felt lately, how she hoped things would be okay, how she was glad at least that she and Yuna had each other. It was well done. In her first life, Yuna would have cried and hugged her and told her everything she knew. Underneath it, she heard, if she knows something, I need to know what it is. Be warm. Make her comfortable. Make her talk. Yuna looked at her and said she was so glad they had each other too, that family was the most important thing. She said it with complete sincerity in her voice. Dawn believed her. That was the thing about people who were used to performing. They sometimes forgot that other people could perform too. The meeting happened on a Sunday morning. Her father gathered everyone in the sitting room. The senior colleague was there, a different lawyer, a woman from a financial firm with a folder that was clearly the result of many months of work. The room had the particular stillness of a place where something important is about to be decided. Her stepmother came in looking composed. She had been preparing herself all morning. Yuna had heard her practicing in the bathroom. Stay calm, look confused, say you love him. Dalnon came in behind her, and her thoughts were too fast and tangled to catch cleanly, which meant she was genuinely frightened for the first time that Yuna could remember. Good, she thought, and then she felt a little tired of herself for thinking it. She sat at the edge of the couch with her hands folded and watched. The lawyer spoke. Numbers came up. Dates. Account names. Her stepmother cried. Her father sat very straight and said very little and aged about 10 years in the space of an hour. At one point, he looked across the room, directly at Yuna, with a look that was not anger or sadness, but something simpler and more naked than either of those things. The thought she caught from him in that moment was just, how long has she known? She held his gaze and didn't look away. That was her only answer, and it was enough, because he was her father, and he had known her long enough to read the things she didn't say. Her stepmother left that winter, quietly. The way these things go in families with enough money to keep them private. Dayon finished the school year in the house, and then moved into her own place in spring. On her last morning, she stood in the hallway with one bag, and looked at Yuna for a long moment. Yuna waited to hear something sharp or cold. Instead, she heard something she had not expected, and did not know what to do with. I wonder if it could have been different. If I had only... The thought trailed off unfinished. Dayon picked up her bag and walked out the door. Yuna stood in the hallway alone, and let that land. It did not change anything that had happened, but she was glad she had heard it, because it reminded her of something she had been in danger of forgetting, that the people who hurt you are not always certain of what they are doing, and sometimes even they can feel the shape of the road they did not take. That evening, her father found her sitting in the garden in the last cold light of winter. He sat beside her, and they were quiet together for a while, which was something they had never really managed before. Then he said, "You knew before I did, didn't you?" She said yes. He asked her how. She looked at him, tired, honest, more real than she had ever seen him, and she said simply, "I paid attention." He nodded slowly. He did not fully believe that was the whole answer. That was fine. Some things are meant to be carried alone. She had made her peace with that. She was 14 years old. She had already lived one life, and watched it end badly. She had come back with nothing except the knowledge of what was coming and the strange quiet gift of being able to hear what no one meant to say out loud. She had used both carefully and without bitterness, and the people she loved were still standing. She leaned back and looked at the sky, and for the first time in either of her lives, she was not bracing for something. She was just sitting in a garden with her father, in the cold, at the end of a very long story that had finally ended the way it was supposed to.